The Virelian Prime Council Hall, a towering structure of sleek black metal and glass, stood silent as the final vote was cast. A soft hum echoed through the chamber, a reminder of the many automated systems that powered the meeting. At the center of it all was the Galactic Council, a mosaic of representatives from hundreds of worlds, each species more alien than the last. Some looked humanoid, others barely resembled life forms at all. Yet all agreed on one thing. Earth, the so-called blue planet, was unworthy of true inclusion in the Galactic Alliance. Admiral Karish, a towering figure whose elongated face bore the scars of countless battles, stood at the center of the council floor. His voice was a low rumble, carrying authority that demanded attention. "It is not a question of Earth's potential," Karish said, his tone laced with condescension. "It is a question of what they've shown us. Primitive weapons, like fire sticks and nuclear bombs, and a culture built on centuries of conflict. Their greatest strength is their unpredictability. They are a chaotic, violent species, and while their planet may have some use, they have not earned the right to participate in our affairs." The other delegates murmured their agreement, many nodding in solemn affirmation. Only a few, like Ambassador Aria, spoke against the tide. She rose from her seat, her voice sharp and unwavering. "You're wrong, Karish. Earth's history is not one of mindless violence. It's one of survival, of overcoming every obstacle, from plague to war, to the brink of annihilation. They are resourceful. If anything, we should be wary of their resilience, not dismiss it." Her word hung in the air for a moment. The delegates exchanged skeptical glances, but Karish's eyes narrowed in disdain. "Resilience is not a measure of worth. They are too unpredictable. They should be offered a minor alliance, an outpost to protect our interests on the edge of the galaxy. Nothing more." The council president, a translucent-skinned being from the Ziltar system, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He glanced down at the large central screen that displayed Earth's data, its technological progress, its fragmented global politics, its war-torn history. "We will vote," the president announced, his voice echoing across the chamber. One by one, the delegates cast their votes in favor of Earth's limited participation. There were murmurs of disappointment, a few whispers of dissent, but the result was inevitable. Earth would be admitted to the Galactic Alliance, but only in the most minor, subordinate way. Their entry would be as a vassal species, their military presence considered negligible in the grand scheme of galactic politics. On Earth, the United Nations Assembly watched the news from the planet's first contact with the stars. The broadcast showed images of alien representatives, their otherworldly forms shimmering in holograms above the heads of world leaders. But the humans in the room weren't focused on the images. They were reading between the lines. Ambassador Aria sat alone in her office, staring at the broadcast from the council. She knew the implications of what had just happened, how the Alliance had dismissed Earth's potential. She clenched her fist. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. The Alliance's envoy ship, the Corvev, descended slowly through Earth's atmosphere, its sleek hull shimmering in the sunlight. The ship was a marvel of alien engineering, a majestic vessel designed for peaceful diplomacy. Its peaceful nature was made clear by the lack of weaponry, and the soft blue glow of its engines indicated non-hostile intent. The first contact was supposed to be ceremonial, a moment of glory for the Galactic Alliance. Humans would be welcomed into the fold with open arms. But as the ship entered Earth's atmosphere, things immediately went wrong. In Washington, D.C., General Lucas Grant stood in the Military Command Center, staring at the live feed of the incoming vessel. His weathered face was stone cold, a reflection of years spent in combat. His staff had already mobilized Earth's global defense systems, but the decision to act was still in his hands. Despite the peaceful nature of the mission, there was something off about the whole scenario, something he didn't trust. "Sir," a young officer said, "we're picking up a strong electromagnetic pulse from the Corvev. It's interfering with our communication systems. The ship's AI is trying to access all of Earth's satellite networks. Grant's eyes narrowed. He had been expecting this. The Alliance wasn't just here to talk. They were probing, testing. But he had no idea how far they had already gone. Launch countermeasures. Now, Grant barked. Within seconds, Earth's global defense network sprang to life. Satellites in orbit were repositioned, and a series of pulse jammers flared to life. But the real surprise came when the United States Space Command initiated the deployment of their Talon III interceptors, specially equipped fighter jets with high-velocity missiles capable of reaching low orbit. On board the Corvette, the alien diplomats were oblivious to the threat until it was almost too late. Suddenly, the first missile streaked toward them. An unguided, supersonic projectile launched with terrifying precision. The Corvette's defensive shields flickered briefly as they engaged, but the missile hit with catastrophic force, tearing into the ship's hull. There was no warning, no chance for the aliens to react. Within seconds, the Corvette was spiraling toward the ground, flames trailing behind it as it plummeted. Back at the command center, Grant watched the wreckage fall, feeling a cold wave of realization wash over him. It wasn't just a weapon malfunction. It was human response. Humans had just shot down an alien craft, and it wasn't an accident. The Corvette crash-landed in the heart of the Nevada desert, its smooth, alien exterior now twisted and scorched by Earth's primitive firepower. Emergency beacons blared, but the wreckage didn't burn out as expected. Instead, it lay dormant, revealing the eerie silence of a battlefield only beginning to take shape. Within minutes, a squad of U.S. Marines, equipped with cutting-edge alien tech they had reverse-engineered, were on site. They moved with military precision, their boots thudding on the desert sands. With their helmets on, it was impossible to see their faces, but their purpose was clear: secure the wreckage and ensure no further surprises. Lieutenant Maria Reyes, a decorated officer and veteran of numerous operations, led the charge. Her gaze locked on the wreckage as she advanced, feeling the weight of the situation settle in her gut. "We don't know what we're dealing with," she said, her voice cold. "Stay alert." The Marines surrounded the craft, their weapons trained on the alien technology, as Reyes knelt to inspect the damage. The Corvette had crashed in one piece, but its systems were failing. The ship's crew, 3 alien diplomats, and a pair of security officers, were still alive but unconscious. The wreckage hissed, sending out plumes of strange vapor into the air. As Reyes examined the ship's hull, a sense of disbelief crept up on her. These beings, so sure of their superiority, had been brought down by a single missile. "You did it," one of the Marines muttered under his breath. "We did it." Reyes looked up, her eyes narrow and focused. "Don't get cocky. We've just started a war." Back on Virelian Prime, the Galactic Council was in a state of utter chaos. The once confident delegates who had dismissed Earth as a harmless, chaotic species were now frantically scrambling to understand what had gone wrong. Admiral Karish, the commanding officer of the Alliance's military forces, paced the war room, his expression tight with frustration. His earlier remarks about Earth being a trivial species now seemed like a grave miscalculation. "They shot down our envoy ship, Admiral," one of his officers, Lieutenant Vess, said, her voice trembling. "Without warning, without provocation, and they're already treating the survivors like prisoners of war." Karish's mandibles clicked together in irritation. He turned toward the holographic display, showing a rotating image of Earth, the blue and green world now marked by its surprise defense. A few scattered images of the wreckage of the Corvette in the Nevada desert were all that remained of the once proud ship. "Impossible," Karish muttered under his breath. "They should have been no match for us." The military officer shook his head. "Sir, we underestimated them. We believed their technology was inferior and their species far too primitive to pose a threat. But their military response, it wasn't just advanced. It was precise, deliberate." "Tell me something I don't know," Karish snapped, frustration clear in his voice. He slammed his fist onto the table, sending a ripple through the display. Did we learn nothing from their history? They've been at war with each other for millennia. They fought with swords and guns, survived plagues, and tore themselves apart. And they still have the audacity to stand in our way. The room fell silent. Karesh's reputation was built on his flawless strategic mind, yet his pride had clouded his judgment. Earth was no longer an unknown entity. It was a wounded beast that had fought back with unexpected ferocity. Admiral Karesh knew they had miscalculated, but he refused to believe that the humans could truly match the power of the Galactic Alliance. "We'll send another ship, a proper force this time," he said with a voice that steeled itself with resolve. "The humans have tasted our power. Let's show them the true might of the Alliance." The officer hesitated, but nodded. "Understood, sir, but we have to be careful. If we strike too quickly, we risk provoking them into full-scale retaliation." Karesh waved him off, his confidence returning. "We are the superior force. They'll fall in line. They just need to learn their place." Meanwhile, on Earth, the United Nations Assembly was holding an emergency session. The world had been shaken by the attack on the Corvette. The first contact that was supposed to be a moment of triumph had turned into a potential disaster. Governments across the globe were on edge, unsure of what to expect next. Yet amid the fear and uncertainty, there was a growing sense of unity. Ambassador Aria, though rattled by the event, was now more determined than ever to ensure humanity's place in the galaxy. She stood before the assembly, speaking with clarity and urgency. "We cannot let them believe we're weak," Aria said, her voice unwavering. "The Alliance will not respect us unless we show them that we can defend ourselves. We have to prepare. We have to fight for our future." A murmur of agreement swept through the room, and the tone shifted. General Grant, now in charge of Earth's military response, had already ordered a global mobilization. Earth would not sit idly by. The world's nations, once divided by politics, now united by the threat of an alien invader, began sharing their military technology in earnest. Back at the Nevada crash site, the Marine team, led by Lieutenant Maria Reyes, continued their search of the wreckage. They had secured the alien diplomats, now detained in a temporary military facility. The ship's technology, though alien, was now under study, with hopes of reverse engineering its systems. "We've got the upper hand now," Reyes said, surveying the wreckage with determination. "The Alliance may think they can outgun us, but they're about to realize just how far we've come." The war was just beginning, and Earth's newfound unity and military might had already sent a clear message to the stars. Humanity was not a passive species. No longer would they be seen as weak, unworthy of respect. The Alliance's retaliation came swiftly, like a hammerfall of calculated precision. A fleet of dreadnought-class warships, massive and heavily armed, was dispatched toward Earth. Admiral Karesh had made his decision. He would no longer rely on diplomacy. The humans had shown their ability to fight, and it was time to show them that the Galactic Alliance could destroy them just as easily. The ships, sleek and deadly in their design, emerged from hyperspace just beyond the moon's orbit, casting an ominous shadow over Earth. At the command center in Cheyenne Mountain, General Grant stood before the tactical displays, his gaze fixed on the incoming ships. "They're not coming for peace," Grant muttered, a grim expression on his face. "They're coming for us." The Galactic Battle Group Alpha consisted of 4 massive warships, each larger than anything Earth had ever seen. Their technology was far beyond anything Earth had developed, boasting energy shields and particle beams capable of disintegrating entire cities in moments. But it wasn't the size of the ships that worried Grant. It was the overwhelming firepower they represented. "We can't match them ship for ship," General Grant said, turning to his staff. "But we don't need to. We'll hit them where they least expect it. Prepare the Talon 3 fighters. I want them launched now." The Talon 3 interceptors, a hybrid of Earth's cutting-edge aerospace engineering and salvaged alien technology, had been developed in secret, but they were no longer a secret. The fighters had the speed and agility to outmaneuver anything the Alliance had in its fleet, and their weapons were deadly. Humanity's fighters took to the skies like hornets from a nest, darting into the atmosphere and arsing toward the looming alien ships. At the forefront of the assault was Captain Sarah Cole, a fighter pilot with nerves of steel. Her squadron, Phoenix Wing, was known for its precision and daring tactics. As they climbed into the upper atmosphere, the comms crackled. "Phoenix 1, do you copy?" came the voice of her wingman, Lieutenant Caleb Brooks. "I copy, Brooks. Stay sharp. We're going to take the fight to them. No retreat. No surrender." The fighters streaked through the thin air at hypersonic speeds, closing the distance between them and the alien fleet. The Alliance ships responded instantly, activating their defensive shields and deploying waves of drone fighters. But Cole had anticipated this. With a quick command, her squadron split into smaller groups, weaving and dodging the incoming fire. "We've got incoming," Brooks warned. "Looks like they're deploying drone swarms." "On my mark," Cole replied. "Launch EMP rounds." In a coordinated move, the Phoenix Wing pilots fired electromagnetic pulse rounds into the advancing drones, disabling them in mid-flight. The drones exploded in bursts of energy, causing a ripple effect in the alien formation. For a moment, the Talon III fighters had the advantage. Earth's military had struck the first blow, taking out hundreds of drone fighters with little effort. But the Alliance wasn't about to back down. A massive pulse of energy flared from one of the dreadnoughts, tearing through the atmosphere. One of the Talon III interceptors was hit, the explosion visible even from the surface. "Brooks!" Cole shouted, but it was too late. Brooks' fighter had been vaporized in a split second. The remaining pilots grit their teeth in silence, but Cole's voice cut through the tension. "Stay focused, Phoenix Wing. We finish this." The battle became a deadly dance. Earth's fighters swarmed around the massive alien ships, avoiding the deadly particle beams and retaliating with guided missiles and plasma cannons. For every hit the humans took, they gave as good as they got, each strike from their small craft sending tremors through the towering Alliance warships. "Captain, we've got an opening on the flagship," reported Lieutenant Reyes, back on the ground, overseeing the attack from Earth's Defense Command. "One of their shields is weakening. This is our chance." Cole didn't hesitate. "Lock onto the weak point. Fire everything we've got." With a blast of concentrated energy, a series of Talon III fighters launched their final volley toward the heart of the Valeris, the flagship of the Alliance fleet. The barrage of missiles and energy blasts tore into the ship's weak shield, forcing it to collapse. A massive explosion erupted, sending shockwaves through the battle. The Valeris didn't fall, but it was badly damaged, its weapon systems faltering. It was clear to both sides that this battle was far from over, but for the first time, the Alliance knew that they were not fighting an inferior species. Earth had struck a devastating blow. The tide had begun to turn. The explosion of the Valeris flagship shook the heavens. The detonation was massive, sending out a shockwave that rippled through the alien fleet. But the flagship didn't fall. Instead, it reeled, smoke billowing from its crippled hull. It was clear that Earth's Talon III interceptors had landed a serious blow, but the war was far from over. As the remnants of the alien fleet scrambled to regroup, General Lucas Grant stood before the global command table, surveying the situation. He had seen the reports. Hundreds of Earth's fighters had engaged with the Alliance in the skies, but the cost had been heavy. The Talon IIIs were formidable, but the alien fleet had numbers on their side, and their firepower dwarfed anything Earth had in its arsenal. "Report from Phoenix Wing, sir," said Colonel Edwards, his voice tight. "They've downed 2 more dreadnoughts, but the enemy flagship is still operational. The drones are adapting to our tactics." Grant's eyes flickered with concern. The Phoenix Wing pilots, led by Captain Sarah Cole, had already proven themselves invaluable. But the longer the battle raged, the clearer it became that Earth couldn't sustain this fight alone. Any sign of reinforcements from the Alliance? Grant asked. Edwards shook his head. Not yet, but it won't be long before they deploy more ships. We've only delayed them. Grant's thoughts raced. He knew Earth had one chance, one opportunity, to push back the Alliance before the reinforcements arrived. If they could take down the Valeris, the alien fleet might collapse. But the task was daunting, especially with Earth's resources stretched thin. There was no room for error. Ready the Omega Strike Team, Grant ordered. We're going for the flagship. Meanwhile, aboard the Valeris, Admiral Karish seethed with anger. His prized warship was damaged, its once pristine hull pockmarked with burns and jagged scars from Earth's weapons. Despite the damage, he refused to admit defeat. The humans had caught them off guard, but that would not happen again. They would learn that no species, no matter how resilient, could stand against the might of the Galactic Alliance. Sir, we've detected a new Earth fleet formation, said Lieutenant Vess, her voice grim. They're preparing for another strike on the flagship. Karish's fists clenched. Earth's tenacity was becoming a serious threat. Launch all remaining drones and engage the enemy interceptors. We cannot let them have the initiative. As the order was given, Karish's warship trembled again as a barrage of missiles slammed into the outer hull. The shields flickered dangerously. The Valeris had already sustained significant damage, but its advanced systems kept it intact. Barely. The Admiral was left with no choice. It was time to send a message. Activate the annihilator cannon, Karish said, his voice like ice. Target Earth's most populated cities. Show them the price of their defiance. The annihilator cannon was the Alliance's ultimate weapon, capable of wiping out entire continents in a single blast. The weapon, still primed for activation, was the reason Karish was willing to risk everything. Back on Earth, Lieutenant Reyes, now in command of the Omega Strike Team, gathered a squad of the most skilled soldiers from around the world. The mission was clear: infiltrate the Valeris flagship, disable the annihilator cannon, and if possible, capture Karish alive. It was a suicide mission, but humanity's survival depended on it. We'll need to move quickly, Reyes said, her voice firm. Once we're inside, we'll have limited time before the enemy adapts. If we don't disable their main weapon, Earth is finished. The team nodded, their resolve hardening. Each member knew the stakes. If they failed, humanity would face annihilation. As the Omega Strike Team prepared to launch from the Talon 3 fighter transports, Captain Cole gave a brief but meaningful salute to Reyes. The fighter pilot had led her squadron through hell, and now she was putting her trust in the team to take the fight to the heart of the Alliance. We've got your backs, Cole said. Make sure you take that bastard down. Reyes nodded. We will. With the fate of Earth hanging in the balance, the team launched from their transports and raced toward the heart of the Valeris. They were heading directly into the jaws of death, but this was humanity's fight. For survival, for honor, and for the future of Earth. The Talon 3 fighters sliced through the blackness of space, carrying Lieutenant Reyes and her Omega Strike Team toward the heart of the Valeris flagship. Inside their cramped cockpits, the soldiers wore expressions of grim determination, knowing the gravity of their mission. Earth's survival depended on this bold strike. If they failed, Earth would be subjected to the annihilator cannon, a weapon capable of erasing entire cities, maybe even entire continents. As they approached the alien ship, Reyes gave the signal. Brace for impact, she ordered, and with a final burst of acceleration, the Talon 3s rocketed toward the Valeris, weaving through the barrage of defensive drones and automated weapons fire that erupted from the flagship. The enemy's defensive systems were fast, but the Earth pilots had learned to anticipate them. The Talon 3s danced like living creatures through the firestorm, evading incoming plasma bolts and energy beams with breathtaking precision. It was a dance of life and death, and each second stretched out as an eternity. We're almost there, Reyes said into the comms, her voice unwavering. Get ready to deploy. At her command, the Omega Strike Team's transport hatches opened, and the soldiers descended toward the Valeris. The flagship's outer hull loomed large before them as they descended into the hangar bay, a massive reinforced chamber built for the fleet's own vessels. The soldiers' boots hit the cold alien floor with a resounding thud as they quickly gathered their equipment. The air inside smelled strange, sterile, like some otherworldly alloy mixed with a faint hum of machinery. Reyes signaled to her team, "Move out, stay close. We breach the core and disable the annihilator cannon." The team moved in perfect synchronization, their weapons drawn, their minds focused. They were in the heart of enemy territory now. This wasn't just a battle of physical strength, but one of willpower. The alien ship, alive with its own advanced technology, seemed to pulse around them. They could feel the hum of its power, and it was a constant reminder of the threat they faced. The team advanced through the narrow corridors, their footsteps muffled by the alien flooring beneath them. Corporal Jin, the team's demolitions expert, led the way, hacking into control panels and bypassing security systems with ease. "Cameras disabled," Jin reported. "We've got a window. Move fast." Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Central Command Core, disable the annihilator cannon, and find Admiral Karish, if they could. They needed to neutralize the threat before the flagship could fire on Earth. As they advanced deeper into the ship, they encountered more resistance, small, tactical drones armed with lethal energy rifles. The soldiers moved with military precision, taking down the drones one by one. It was clear that the Alliance was not underestimating Earth anymore, but humanity's soldiers were relentless. "We're close," Reyes said, her voice calm but urgent. "The annihilator cannon is just beyond this corridor. Prepare for heavy resistance." The team pressed on, adrenaline coursing through their veins. They rounded a corner and found themselves in front of the massive core chamber. The door was reinforced, but not impenetrable. Sergeant Carter, the team's heavy weapons expert, set up a charge and detonated it, blowing the door open. Inside the core chamber, they found the heart of the Valeris, a giant, pulsing cannon that sat at the center of a web of glowing alien power conduits. The weapon's energy flux was visibly unstable, its thrumming power filling the air. "We've got company," whispered Private Thomas, his eyes scanning the room. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the chamber, followed by the ominous sound of a voice. "You think you can stop me?" The voice came over the ship's loudspeakers, chilling and menacing. Admiral Karish had arrived. The team whirled around, weapons raised. Standing in the doorway of the chamber was Karish, his elongated form towering over them. His mandibles clicked as he surveyed the soldiers before him. "You're brave humans," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "But brave soldiers do not survive when they face the inevitable." Rey stepped forward, her weapon trained on the alien leader. "We've fought worse than you." The tension in the room was palpable. This was the moment of truth. Reyes knew that they had no choice but to take down Karish, but the stakes were higher than ever. The annihilator cannon was nearly operational. They had mere minutes. "Take him down," Reyes shouted. The air in the core chamber of the Valeris seemed to thrum with an almost tangible energy, the hum of the annihilator cannon reverberating through the walls. Admiral Karish stood tall, his eyes glinting with cold, calculating malice as he surveyed the Omega Strike Team. The alien's powerful frame towered over them, his segmented exoskeleton gleaming in the dim light, and his mandibles clicked in an expression of amusement. "You think you can stop me, humans?" Karish sneered, his voice a low, menacing growl. "You've fought well, but you're nothing more than insects beneath the boot of the Alliance." Lieutenant Reyes stood firm, her weapon aimed directly at Karish's chest. She had faced danger before, but this was different. This was the fight for Earth's very survival. "We've faced extinction before," Reyes replied, her voice unwavering. "And we've survived. We don't bow to invaders." Without warning, Karish lunged forward with inhuman speed, his massive claws swiping through the air like a bladed weapon. Rise and the rest of the team scattered, barely evading the strike. The sound of the alien's claws scraping against the walls reverberated through the chamber, sending vibrations through the floor. Fire! Rise barked, and the team unleashed a volley of shots. The high-powered rounds slammed into Karish's armor, but it barely seemed to faze him. He shrugged off the hits like a beast shaking off flies. His movements were swift, fluid, and terrifyingly efficient. Sergeant Carter unleashed a grenade from his launcher, the blast sending a shockwave that rocked the entire room. Karish staggered for a moment, but the alien remained unscathed, his gaze now filled with disdain. "You are brave," Karish said, his mandibles clicking in amusement, "but no amount of bravery will save you now." Rise knew they couldn't fight him head-on, not with their current weapons. They needed to outsmart him. The Annihilator cannon was still charging, its pulsating light growing brighter with each passing second. Every moment they wasted battling Karish meant the weapon was getting closer to being fully operational. If they didn't disable it soon, Earth was as good as gone. "Jin, can you get into their systems?" Rise shouted over the chaos, her voice cutting through the sound of the ongoing battle. "I'm on it," Jin replied, already moving to a nearby console. He began tapping furiously at the alien control panel, bypassing security protocols with ease. The soldiers continued to keep Karish distracted, their shots forcing him to stay on the defensive for a few moments. But Karish was relentless. With a sudden, bone-chilling roar, he surged forward, knocking Private Thomas out of the way with a powerful swipe. The soldier flew across the room, his body slamming into the wall with a sickening crunch. "No!" Rise screamed, her heart racing. Thomas was out cold. He wasn't dead, but the impact had incapacitated him. In that moment of distraction, Karish turned his focus back to Rise. He was about to charge when Jin shouted from across the room. "I've got it. I've disabled the Annihilator cannon's power core. It's going to take a minute for them to reroute the systems." "Move!" Rise yelled. The team shifted positions, diving behind cover as Karish roared in fury. He slammed his fists into the floor, creating massive cracks in the steel beneath him, and charged again, determined to crush them all in one swift motion. Rise had no choice. With a surge of adrenaline, she sprinted forward, her hand reaching for the detonator in her belt. She had one shot at this, and it had to work. Karish was close now, his claws raised. Rise activated the charge, and just as the Admiral lunged toward her, she threw herself to the side, the explosion tearing through the alien's armor with devastating force. For a moment, everything went silent. The Valeris shook violently as the blast tore into the ship's structural integrity, creating a cascade of explosions. The cannon's power core was disabled, at least for now. Karish roared in rage as his exoskeleton began to crack, and the force of the explosion sent him sprawling to the ground. Rise didn't hesitate. She seized the moment, rushing toward the downed Admiral, her weapon aimed at his vulnerable throat. "End of the line, Karish," she said, her voice cold. The alien looked up at her, his eyes burning with fury, but a hint of surprise flickered in his expression. "You think you've won. The Alliance is unstoppable. The Empire will." "No," Rise interrupted, her voice hard. "It ends today." With one final shot, Rise ended the threat of the Valeris and the Annihilator cannon. The flagship was crippled, its once deadly weapon useless. The alien menace had been stopped, for now. The room fell silent, save for the distant hum of the failing ship. The Omega Strike team had done it. Earth had a fighting chance. But as Rise looked down at the body of Karish, she knew that this battle was only one of many to come. The Alliance would not give up so easily. But for now, Earth had won. The Valeris flagship shuddered under the strain of the explosion, its systems failing one by one. Lieutenant Rise stood over the fallen Admiral Karish, her chest rising and falling with the weight of the moment. The Admiral's once mighty form lay still, his cold, reptilian eyes unblinking. The threat to Earth was over, at least for now. She turned to her team, her expression a mix of relief and grim determination. Sergeant Carter helped Private Thomas to his feet, the latter groaning in pain from the brutal impact against the wall. Though injured, Thomas was alive. Earth's soldiers had proven their resilience yet again. "We did it," Carter said, his voice hoarse, but filled with pride. "We stopped the annihilator cannon." Reyes gave a tight nod, though she knew it was far from over. The Velaris was crippled, but the Alliance fleet still loomed beyond the atmosphere. They had won a battle, but the war was far from finished. "Let's get to the escape pods," Reyes ordered. "This ship is coming apart. We're not sticking around for the cleanup." As the team gathered their injured and prepared to leave the ship, the entire structure of the Velaris groaned with a deafening screech. The outer hull was already beginning to breach, the core of the flagship unstable from the series of explosions that had crippled it. The countdown to its inevitable destruction had begun. Outside, the battle raged on. Earth's Talon III fighters continued to engage the remaining Alliance ships. With the flagship's communication systems down, the remaining enemy fleet had begun to retreat, but not without fighting to the bitter end. The humans had forced them into a desperate scramble. The tide had turned, but Earth wasn't done yet. Back at the command center, General Grant stood with his eyes glued to the tactical display, his face a mix of exhaustion and cautious optimism. "Report from the ground team," Colonel Edwards said, breaking the silence. "The flagship's command structure has been neutralized. Karish is dead. The annihilator cannon is offline." Grant's shoulders relaxed, the weight of months of pressure momentarily lifting. They had done it. Earth had made its stand, and for now, it had succeeded. "Prepare for counterattacks," Grant added, his voice unwavering. "The Alliance won't take this defeat lightly. We've bought ourselves a moment, but that's all." On the surface of Earth, the victory celebrations were short-lived. The global news networks buzzed with reports of the Velaris flagship's destruction and the death of Admiral Karish, but humanity was no stranger to the harsh reality of war. Earth had beaten the odds once, but the message from the alien empire was clear. Earth had become a target that would not be easily forgotten. In the aftermath of the battle, Captain Sarah Cole and the other surviving pilots returned to their bases. They had faced death countless times, but this victory had felt different. They had not only defended their home, they had struck a blow to the heart of a seemingly invincible enemy. Yet, as Cole looked out over the horizon, the thought lingered in her mind. The Alliance would return. This victory, though sweet, was a single chapter in a much larger story. Earth had proven it was capable of fighting back, but there would be no rest. The war for humanity's survival had only just begun. Meanwhile, Reyes stood on the ruined deck of the Velaris, looking out at the distant stars. The enemy was retreating, but the danger was far from over. Earth had faced annihilation, but now it had a new purpose. They had not only survived, they had shown the galaxy that humanity would never back down. And as the ship's engines began to falter, and the Velaris began its final descent into the atmosphere, she knew the war had entered a new phase, one where Earth would stand as a symbol of defiance and hope, its people bound together by the unyielding spirit of survival. Humanity had claimed its victory, but the fight for the future was only beginning.